Welcome, everybody, into the Valley. I am Ethan Shutt, joined by my brother Ryan and our man Philip Russell for episode 25. Is that a thing worth celebrating? Do we get to celebrate 25 episodes?
Our podcast can officially rent vehicles.
That's true.
Congratulations, we did it.
I think this is probably the last small milestone until we hit 50, which, halfway there. But we are Into the Valley, a Phoenix Suns podcast. Like I said, here with Ryan and Philip, we are the number one Phoenix Suns podcast based out of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Haven't found another one to compete with us quite yet. But welcome to the show. If you're new listening, thanks for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. I can physically wave at you. And if you're listening, watching, whatever, feel free to subscribe, like the video or the episode, do whatever you want to do. But most importantly, we just appreciate you joining us. Want to go ahead and start by pointing out the massive elephant in the Phoenix Suns room, and that is the Robert Sarver situation. Since last recording last Monday, the article did break. That news did come out, and we do have thoughts on it. We had thoughts on it when it was rumored to start with, and we are going to touch on that towards the end of the show. We're going to stick with our normal format, covering the week in Phoenix Suns basketball, as that is still the forefront of the podcast. But at the end of the episode, in our Just So You Knows, we're going to touch on that situation just a little bit more. We don't want to give you 30, 40 minutes just going over that, but we do want to touch on it. We think that's fair and a good use of our time as well. So the Phoenix Suns sitting at 5-3, fourth in the Western Conference. If I told you that the Suns were going to start 5-3, guys, what would your initial reactions be as if you rewind and kind of think back to how the season started? 5-3, how are you feeling kind of overall?
I'd say kind of par for the course. That seems kind of a decent start, especially if you look at last year. We were a little slow starting also. It was also to be expected with, a long summer going deep in the playoffs and then Booker going to the Olympics. I wouldn't have expected an 8-0 start by any means. I would have liked to have hoped for better for 5-3, but I'm certainly not disappointed by it to start off.
Yeah, Philip, what are you thinking? Fourth in the West, obviously. Not going to be mad about that after the first couple weeks.
To quote a great philosopher,
oh no,
I ain't worried about nothing. I don't think there are any major cause for concerns right now from the Phoenix Suns. Some minute issues that we're going to get to when we get to our lows today. But especially after this week, a couple wins, well, really one win against a good Atlanta team, and then a couple gritty performances where we saw a couple comebacks from the Suns. So they're getting the job done. They're starting to look sharper as the season progresses. So 5-3, especially after the first week of the season, all good.
Yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned it on our last episode when it was just us, Philip, or the one before, but I am going to withhold judgment on any NBA team until 20 games in. That is kind of my rule of thumb with analyzing anything, and it kind of applies to any professional sport. Give it to about the 25% of the season mark, and then I think you can really see what the landscape's going to look like. And sure, you're going to have your weird outliers. In the MLB this year, you had teams like the Cardinals randomly flip the script, but that doesn't happen often. You see who they are, and sure, maybe things will develop. Maybe different storylines will branch off, but you kind of have a good idea. So we're 8 games in. We've still got a lot to figure out. We have a lot of cool storylines, I think, early on already in terms of individual player development that we may not have seen coming, and I know we'll get to that shortly. But to recap kind of the week in a nutshell from when we last talked, started off with the Suns beating the Pelicans 112-100. The Pelicans led by 20 points midway through the second quarter, and the Suns had another crazy hot quarter and ended on a 36-18 fourth quarter to take a 12-point lead. Again, slow, kind of groggy start, which is unfortunately becoming a bit of the norm. But you kind of see these leaders, these winners say, hey, we're not going to lose this game, and put it together. Just a quick tidbit, led in scoring by Mikal Bridges with 22, which all three of us obviously are big fans of. Then the Suns played the incredibly weird Houston Rockets. Philip, I forgot what you texted us when that game started, but it was something where it was like this roster was just like made up. Like it it's out of nowhere. Isn't it one of the weirdest teams you've ever seen like actually play bad? Like it's not a, oh, we have 8 guys hurt type of thing. It's a, yep, here we are. We're the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, when you watch the Rockets, you kind of sit there and go, who thought this was a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality with such a young team having gotten rid of James Harden recently, they're not trying to be particularly great at basketball right now. So developing their young talent is to be expected. And those are the kinds of games that even with the Rockets playing pretty well, especially in the first half, the Suns have to take care of business to be at the level that we expect them to be. And they did a good job with that behind Booker's good close to the game.
Yeah, I was going to say Booker ended with 27 on 8 of 18, not exactly a normal, efficient Booker night, but took care of business when it was needed. And then the Hawks game that you mentioned, Philip, Ryan, I know watching that one, it was a weird one. Suns ended up winning 121 to 117. Kind of the big stat that I pulled from it, kind of just looking at how the game went, is that for the first 30 minutes of the game, no one led by more than 5 points. So it was tight from the get-go and stayed that way for a good long time. And eventually, the most unexpected player in the world decided to take over the game. And Philip, who's that guy again?
Be a Frank the Tank Kaminsky.
Frank the Tank Kaminsky. Ryan, when I tell you that Frank the Tank Kaminsky took over a game in the regular season for the Phoenix Suns against a good team, one word that pops in your mind.
Huh?
That is probably more than accurate.
And here's the thing. If you think back to last year, though, when we first started our podcast, we started it probably somewhere between the 15 to 20 game mark last season. There was a stretch early last season where Frank had a couple of really good games, but even those had nothing like what we saw in this Hawks game.
They didn't impact the game.
Right.
Honestly.
This one, Frank came out when we needed somebody to step up, and he stepped up in a way that I've never seen him do probably since Wisconsin. And it was everything. And Philip and I were texting about this. It was everything. His off the ball movement was great. His attacking the rim was great. His passing was great. Everything he did worked, and it was beautiful. Props to him.
Honestly, it reminded me of a taller Dario on offense and an actually defensively competent Dario on defense. It was great. He filled a void. He filled a void that the Suns had. Not even, taking into account DeAndre Ayton's current injury status, kind of on and off. He was hurt, played. Monty said he woke up sore. No rush, or no real reason to rush him back out there. Taking it slow. Again, you kind of have that luxury when you are 5-3 and you're in a good spot. But Booker with 38 points, him and Paul both had fantastic weeks. Mixed bags in terms of shooting performances at time for both of them, but they both ended with Player of the Week nominees. Neither one did win, but Paul on the offensive end assists, crazy numbers. I can't remember. It was somewhere in the range of
14.7.
Yeah, 14-ish, crazy. Offensively, he was just on fire. So it was a good week. We talked a week ago. We said, hey, looking at this upcoming week in basketball, what do we expect? I think 3-1 was a lot of our kind of hey, this is hopeful. Obviously 4-0 on the table. Someone might have thrown out a 2-2, just being a little, cautious with it. But they play the Kings tonight. So tomorrow, as you're listening, which will be your today. Wonderful how time works. I know. Sorry, guys. My bad.
Is that daylight savings time?
I was going to say, I officially went a little galaxy brain on you all.
Is that the metaverse?
As you're listening, you will know how the game went against the Kings, I believe, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. If Ryan moves his head a little bit for our YouTube folks, we can see that, yes, it is the Kings. And then the upcoming schedule, I really do love your background, Ryan. It makes my job a lot easier.
Wish I could take credit. I find it online.
Swivel on over for me.
There you go, baby.
Kings tonight. We've got the Blazers on Wednesday at home, if I'm reading the color coordination correctly, which will be nice. No?
Yes? You're right.
Don't give me a no-yes combo. That's confusing as crap. But yeah, I was going to say, so I know they played at Portland earlier in that rough opening stretch, so it would make sense to be home. And then decent little road trip Friday away at Memphis. which is a bit of a bummer just because we in Kentucky actually don't get to watch that game for blackout reasons. So we'll have to read up as much as possible and rely on the highlights, and then followed up with Houston on Sunday. And then when we're recording next week, it'll be a similar situation, Timberwolves that evening. It's a lot. It's a lot
of with a good week coming up. But man, I can't get over it. The Hawks was our first, I feel like, marquee win. Like if I look at the 8 games we've played so far, the Hawks is the first game I look at, and I'm like, that's the team we can be. And that's exciting to see coming to, like you said, this stretch of games that we've got coming up.
I think to me, the one, I guess it was at tail end of the second and then third quarter against the Lakers where the Suns were just, eternal fire hot on both sides. But that win looked more impressive when it was the Lakers and not the 2.5 weeks into the season Lakers. And again, I think we'll see what teams really are soon. But that win is becoming less and less impressive as the Lakers are kind of figuring it out. But we're going to do what we do here in season 2. It's been working well. Why stop now? High, low, and just so you know. And Philip, I'm going to kick it off to you. I think I already know what your high is. I think we've already touched on it, but I want you to go full basketball nerd on me if you don't mind. What is your high for the Phoenix Suns this week?
Frank Kaminsky was everything the Suns needed this week, and it even extends beyond just filling in for DA. One of the worries that I had coming into the season was who was going to make up what Dario's void that he's leaving being out with a knee injury. And specifically, one of the things that Dario is really good at is being a playmaker off the pick and roll. When the guard sets or when a guard gets screened for, a lot of times defenses will double or they'll blitz. So that guard needs to get rid of it early, which means a big is usually catching it somewhere near the top of the key or maybe even at the nail right around the free throw line. And that puts a big in a position where they have to make a pretty quick decision, kick it to the corner if the defense is collapsing, look opposite wing to see if there's another playmaker over there who can drive off of the defensive rotation, attack the basket if there's a smaller defender. And it's tough. That's not an easy thing to do because there's a lot of information being processed at the same time. And if you scroll back on our Twitter, we have a great example from earlier this week of how good Frank is at that. There was a play. I think it was against the Pelicans. Maybe it was the Pelicans or the Rockets.
I think it was the first game of this week's series. Let me.
Yeah. So it would have been the Pelicans then, where Frank sets a screen. He catches the ball right at the free throw line and you see him go through progression. So he has someone to his right in the corner. Defense cuts that off. He has someone cutting. Someone goes with the cutter, which left somebody to his left wide open. And it's not the smoothest play you've ever seen, but it's still one motion.
I'm watching it right here. And it's very, nope. And then he's got him in the corner.
But it's smooth. It's smooth. And there's an awkward fluidity to it. But what it shows is that Frank is aware of his options. He knows where he can go with the ball. And then what that means is if he becomes that guy where he can facilitate out of the pick and roll, defenses are going to have to change the way they're guarding the pick and roll, which likely means Booker and CP3 are going to get switched on by bigs, or they're going to have to drop, which might open some pull-up threes, which Devin especially has been shooting better on pull-up threes this season. So having that guy in the middle to be able to make plays will unlock so much on the offensive end for the Suns, and that is incredibly exciting. And additionally, it's something that Frank is doing significantly better than DA this season. So hopefully with DA out for a little bit, he can watch what Kaminsky's doing and he can try to implement some of that into his game that he can implement in the first unit and then keep Frank playing with the second unit as a playmaker.
And Frank showed this really cool moment of self-awareness in a press conference this week where he was talking about his game. And he's like, I've always been able to affect the game with my mind. He's like, I know the game so well. He said, I may not be the most athletic person on the court. I think we all know that. But where I change the game and where I can impact the game is with my mind and my basketball IQ, essentially is what he's saying. And I think we saw that on display really all week where, he's not the most athletic guy, but if you've got a guy out there with the skill set to make something happen, but who knows what to do in a given moment, that's a valuable player. So I'm with you, Philip. Like I've been more than impressed by this Frank Kaminsky that we're seeing so far.
He deserves minutes over JaVale McGee. Period.
Yes.
Period. I think as of this moment, they'll probably keep playing JaVale because that would be a tough look to bring a veteran in and then have him go to the bench. But JaVale, Ethan, you had a great tweet from our account. His stock goes up and down so much during the game. He does some things great, and then the next possession, to be blunt, he looks completely incompetent, both on the offensive and defensive end. Frank has been steady. He's been consistent. And again, he's been filling voids that the Suns desperately need someone to fill. So everybody being healthy, I think the rotation needs to be DA obviously starting, and then bring Frank in. Frank needs to be the first big off the bench right now.
Yeah, I think confidence has always been the thing with Frank. And I don't know if, obviously that's not a quantifiable thing, but you saw it back in his Wisconsin days. Like the way he killed an overly athletic, overly talented Kentucky team, along with Decker, Nigel Hayes, the whole crew. He was always in the right place, and he always knew what to do, and he was always very reliable. And he's just been in tough spots ever since he got drafted where he got drafted, and having so many great players in that draft come after him. It's been, I mean, it's got to be tough. And so I really do think the confidence is coming, and that's good, especially after the playoffs where it would have been pretty easy for him to be a little hard on himself, knowing he couldn't quite fill the void that was needed then. But it looks like he's improved. One of my weird little highlights from the week was Mikal Bridges reposting on his Instagram story a graphic of Frank Kaminsky with his stats from the Suns account, I think, after he just absolutely went off. And like, I love to see that. Like, I love to see those guys supporting each other. So it makes me feel good. Ryan, high for the week.
Yeah, so mine, you've kind of alluded to this already. Obviously, we know Paul George won Player of the Week, but Book and Paul were both finalists, and their stat lines are insane. My high of the week are these stat lines. So Booker's numbers through the 3 games last week averaged 27.7 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 4 assists, shot 49% from the field, 82% free throw. But this is the killer for me for Book, 44% from 3. And that is a thing that he's really lacked like the last season and a half, really since the 3-point contest, is a consistent 3-point shot. And that, to me, if he is able to bring that this season to his game, he could near be untouchable. So I love seeing that early on this season, and hopefully that's sustainable. But in addition to that, you had Chris Paul, who averaged 13 points a game, 6 rebounds, 14.7 assists, shooting 53 from the field, only 28 from 3, which isn't great, but 90 from free throw. So both of them just had stellar weeks. I love to see that after a slow start, especially from Book through the first probably 3 or 4 games, to have him playing at this level again. I know that's just kind of a lot of stats right there, but to me, that just speaks to these guys are back in the rhythm of it. And if these are the kind of nights we're going to get from the two of them, we are going to be a very good team again this season. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And my high is, honestly, the first 2 that came to my mind are honestly what you all covered. But I kind of was just thinking, the last loss came against the Kings on the buzzer beater. And that's a tough loss to take. And so my high for the week is just the team rebounding well in terms of their mentality, coming off a heartbreaking loss, rattling off, 3-4 wins now since then. And on top of that, they now get to play the Kings again this evening. So you could be listening to this on Tuesday and thinking, wow, Ethan is an absolute moron. They just got beat by the Kings again. But hopefully they will right the ship, get the revenge that is much needed. Kings are coming off of, I believe, a game last night. So this is a second of a back-to-back for them. Suns have no real excuse not to be able to come out hot. Ayton is out, which is very interesting given that Rashawn Holmes is slowly becoming Superman, which honestly any Suns fan should be happy for him and his sweet mom on Twitter. He's great. Glad to see him doing well. But I'm thrilled to go a whole week from recording to recording without a loss on the score sheet. That said, we've had a really good week, lots of wins, but with every high, we also have to have our lows. So Ryan, I'm going to swing it back to you. What is the low for this week for you when it comes to the Suns?
Phillips touched on this a little bit, and mine's kind of a pairing. DA's injury is worrisome, but in addition to that, I've just been really disappointed by JaVale McGee. The way I've been impressed by Landry Shamet, McGee's kind of the flip side of that coin for me. I really had higher expectations for what he might bring to this team coming into the season, especially with DA and Dario. Well, DA needing a backup and Dario being hurt. He's been okay. I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I was just overhyped to get JaVale McGee, another competent big man on the team, after not having much depth there last season. But he's just kind of been mediocre at best, I think is probably fair, and at some points bad. And so my low is just JaVale McGee not quite being the addition so far that I was hoping he would be. Again, to your point, it's still early on and guys are getting things figured out, and he's coming into a very established team in rotation. But to Philip's point, if Frank's playing the way he's playing, give me Kaminsky minutes all day at this point.
No, I'm thrilled. I will say the JaVale thing, I'm hoping it's just a time and a fit thing where it kind of clicks. But Philip, you've watched more JaVale McGee than anyone I know, given the amount of Warriors basketball games you've watched in your career. You got anything to add to that one?
They need to simplify the sets when JaVale's on the court. The Suns run it a lot where they'll pass the ball to the big at the top or at the elbow, and then they have to make decisions with handoffs, dribbling hard towards a teammate out on the wing and making those decisions. JaVale, maybe it's a time thing, but he has been terrible in those. He has turned the ball over multiple times in several games this week trying to run that set. But there were a couple games when they just simplified it. They simplified it and made him almost exclusively a rim runner and a finisher. And I think that's where he's going to prosper this season. The only issue becomes how long can you play someone who's exclusively a rim runner in the kind of offense that Monty wants to run. So if he can't sharpen up his playmaking from the elbow, from the wing, then his minutes are just not going to be there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in terms of just players not quite looking themselves, that's kind of where my low is too. It seems like our team's been hit with a bit of the inefficiency bug. We've had more games where I can point out multiple players having bad shooting nights rather than good. Cam Johnson found himself in a bit of a slump. Landry Shamet was as hot as humanly possible to start and then kind of fell back to earth. I will say I did love him having the confidence to start shooting some up in a close game. I want to see more from him, obviously, with that contract, unless you're going all tinfoil trade value. The Suns want to keep him around, I would think. But the Suns have just not quite shot well. Even, Ryan, when you were spouting off Booker's great numbers for the week, though his 3-point percentage was above what we would expect, his 2-point percentage was below. He is slowly climbing back up into true shooting ranks, which is usually somewhere where he thrives, just given how efficient he is everywhere at the rim, long twos, magic foot on the line, 3-pointers that count as 2 but always go in. Like, that's what he does. And he's been a little slow. Paul's had a couple horrible shooting nights himself. So when you can scrap up these wins while shooting so poorly, it does make me happy. So the efficiency's not there. The shooting's not there. I wonder if that's maybe why the 3-point attempts have gone down so much. Maybe they're less inclined to shoot them when they're not seeing them go in. But that's just, again, it's big picture stuff. It's hard to really nitpick when you're winning games. But I just think a lot of these games would be either much bigger margins of victory or games like the Hawks games aren't even that close if you're just a little bit more efficient shooting the ball. So nothing too bad there. Pretty happy all around. Philip, what was your low for the week?
I think Dooley's bad.
Yes, thank you. How is he getting minutes?
I just don't know what he's bringing to the table right now, and I don't know what he is going to bring to the table right now. And there are a lot of Suns fans who are making this comparison, but Dooley's making a whopping $2 million, which is a lot of money. It's just not a lot of money in basketball terms. Torrey Craig's making 4.8 on the Pacers. Now, next year, Torrey has guaranteed money. He has $5 million guaranteed next year with the Pacers, and Dooley has a team option for 2.1 next year. But it's almost like every time he's on the court, I've thought it would be nice if that was Torrey Craig instead of Dooley. His head down drives to the basket have been, heinous. He's averaging 26% from the field on 3 shots a game. I just don't know what he's bringing to the table that's going to keep him in the rotation. And you think, okay, he's only playing 10 minutes. And it's like, yeah, what if those 10 minutes are then split to guys like Cam Johnson, getting him a little bit more run, Landry Shamet, getting him out there. And even Alfred Payton has been a lot better than Dooley this year. I think Alfred Payton's done a good job of at least getting into the lane, and his decision-making isn't stellar by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still better than Dooley's.
That's what I was going to say. Dooley right now, offensively, I would liken him to follow with me here, the one good basketball player on a really bad high school basketball team, where in his mind, he's like, I can get to the rim. This will work. And so the moment his brain flips that switch, the other four players kind of just disappear. He drives to the rim, and I don't think he has any plan B, C, or D. It is, I'm throwing something up there. And as you said, the numbers aren't showing that that's a good decision. And the only way that that is okay, maybe, is if defensively he was incredibly efficient and is like, wow, he's really jumping out at me. And I'm just not seeing that. So, yeah, Monty Williams' decision to keep playing him is one that I know has a lot of Suns fans scratching their head, myself included. It could just be because he's a good-looking dude. And after Oubre left and they left Tsunami Poppy, they liked Pyramid Poppy, and they're like, well, but I don't think that's quite the reasoning we're needing here for the basketball. So more than likely that was just a bunch of stupid talking out of my mouth. So it is what it is. But highs and lows have come and gone. We will now hit a pause on basketball-related things, I will say, and kind of push them aside. We've got about 10 minutes left, a little less, to talk about our Just So You Knows, and we're going to kind of just take this on as one big discussion amongst all of us. The article did come out detailing what I would say not just Robert Sarver, but detailing Robert Sarver, issues related to him in a bigger picture, which I believe is a toxic workplace environment. And so if you're here just for the basketball, just know that this is kind of how we're going to close it, centered around this. But Philip, you're my English teacher here. You read the article. I know we all did. You probably read it with a bigger brain approach than maybe I did. As you all know, I can only read so much. But what kind of jumped out to you in the article, just kind of keeping it in its place as a solo piece of literature there?
Yeah, so my low for this week, we were kind of up in the air on how this was going to be. My low for the week was going to be what the article said about the Suns organization as a whole and not just Robert Sarver. That was a really disheartening aspect of this article. So Holmes presents the piece as Robert Sarver, in his tenure with the Suns, has facilitated a work environment that he calls toxic and sometimes hostile, including racial insensitivity and misogyny. And that's what Holmes then tries to show throughout the article. And part of the way through the article, it pivots and it stops talking directly about Sarver's toxicity and hostilities and insensitivities and pivots to just the general environment of the Phoenix Suns organization. And that is where I was really surprised, because some of the discourse online seemed directed exclusively at Sarver. And I think the article bears out that there is a deeper, or there at least has been, a deeper issue with the Suns organization than just Sarver. Sarver should answer for the allegations here in the article, but there are other individuals in the Suns organization who, if these allegations are completely accurate, need to be held accountable for their complicity, and they're perpetuating the environment that Sarver might have started.
Yeah, I think a lot of people went into this article with Sarver tinted goggles, and a big part of that was that tweet from 2 weeks ago now. People were going into it with a goal in mind, which is, what has Sarver done? And I know both of you all have worked in education for the majority of your careers, which, by the way, shout out to our boy Ryan, passed a big test to get his master's degree this week. But with you guys being in education, I know it's a little different, the perspective on work environment on a corporate level. And again, not to belittle or pass on the Sarver thing, But one of the biggest things that ate away at me was that it was such a massive indictment on the corporate culture within the organization. Uh, People seem to just think it's basketball. It's a basketball company, basketball money. And I'm reading things where I'm like, how does this HR let this happen? How does an HR rep openly say, we know the mentality is that we can't get anything done? Like that ate up at me as someone who has worked within people operations as a whole in various areas of corporate life and going through more corporate trainings than I'd like to admit of dealing with good people within HR of Fortune 100 companies who I've met and care so much about their people and their reputation and what their piece of the puzzle is. It just seemed sad. It seemed like a defeated group, um, where it's either they really just didn't care, which is awful and it's unfair, or these people have some sort of motive to saying the things they're saying. And I sure hope it's not that, right? I'm hoping that a bunch of former employees would not go on record to have some point to get across to accomplish something on the way out. Like I would hope that's never the case. And especially when we talked about the sexual allegations and the sexual misconduct there, I would never in a million years believe that that's the case. But it just ate at me. It felt gross. It felt wrong. And the fact that there were so many people going on record from 8 different branches within the company, right? Obviously, Sarver's not hands-on managing or directing them in their day-to-day. And the way he even talked to lower level employees in such a just gross way, right? The do I own you? Are you one of mine? This way of viewing the corporate structure that's just pretty disgusting in my book. But it just seemed like there was a lot wrong, and the people up top, if they were aware, certainly didn't do anything to stop it, and certainly didn't do anything to promote something else.
One thing I do appreciate, though, is the speed with which the NBA has taken up an official investigation, especially looking at other major sports programs. I especially think of Roger Goodell and the handling of Deshaun Watson and John Gruden, and some of these things where it felt like either things were hidden or covered up or feet have been dragged. The speed with which the NBA have said, hey, there seems to be, where there's smoke, there's fire. Let's dig into this. I'm pleased with how quickly that's taken up. I know people have varying opinions on Adam Silver, but I'm confident that the NBA is going to take a good look at this, and I think that's going to be more telling than this article will be, because I think anything that has been brought to light already will either be confirmed or we'll see even more brought up. And I do appreciate that, because sometimes the easy answer is to downplay or to brush under or hide something. And it looks like the NBA at least wants to be as transparent as possible in pursuit of the truth.
Yeah, and to that point, one of the things that Holmes does well in the article is kind of recognizing the limitations of having anonymous sources, where what he does is he doesn't just talk to a few people on and off the record, but he got source after source after source. So what it does is it invites the reader to consider the preponderance of evidence. When you have allegations being made against Sarver using the denials through his legal team, you're left with all of these sources citing instances that are completely unacceptable. And we're left to make the decision, did Sarver facilitate an atmosphere of racial insensitivity, misogyny, and a toxic work environment? And from the reporting that Holmes did, my answer to that would be yes, he did. And this is a top-down issue that has to be addressed by the NBA.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people were nitpicking over is there evidence, is there not, because of these anonymous, witnesses, and people compared it to Donald Sterling, who really did have kind of the smoking gun in the case of actual evidence of him saying the things that were claimed. But again, it's not our place to bind our opinions of it on you all that are listening. I think all of us are just trying to take an approach of priority goes to those that were affected negatively, and making sure that changes come about to where they get justice for the wrongdoing that was done their way, but that also it will be taken care of for the future of that organization. But there's a lot to find out. Like Ryan said, with the investigation coming, I think this topic's not going anywhere for quite some time.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on it real quick, I think my hope after reading this article is that some culture shift can happen within the Phoenix Suns organization, that working for the Phoenix Suns brings some semblance of the joy that us fans get in watching the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I hope to see soon enough where Suns Twitter can be united in cheering, not just for the players on the court, but for the organization as a whole. I think there are great leaders within that organization on the basketball side with Chris Paul, Monty Williams, James Jones, to name a few. And hopefully that leadership can kind of shine as a light to those around and continue seeing some good change. But again, we didn't want to be too exhaustive in this, but we did read the piece. We do have our thoughts. Feel free to put any questions in the comments or tweet at us as well if you want any follow-up. But that said, we appreciate you guys listening as always. Ryan, glad to have you back. We missed you. It's good to have you back. Next Monday, we're going to have a lot of basketball to talk about. So hopefully you'll join us then as well. For Ryan and Philip, I am Ethan. This is Into the Valley, Phoenix Suns podcast.
We out.